The best I can describe is, it may sound like a cliche. Uh, it was not an institution. The word institution sometimes has a very different meaning. Uh, it was a large extended family, and it still is, even after so many decades. And the older I get, the more I realize that it was one large family, which was very nurturing place, which also happened to provide me with probably the best medical education anywhere in the world. And I'm not just saying it because I'm a Johnite and I'm proud, but after being in medical practice for almost 27, 28 years, uh, you know, I'm a firm believer that we definitely got the best education, best overall education from this extended family. Yes, we got into a lot of trouble in the first couple of years. My classmates did. We were young, we were 18. And I remember in anatomy dissection in my group, somebody dissected a small piece of flesh from a cadaver and put it in the lab coat of one of the nuns. And after that, we went for lunch to the mess. And as she was standing in line waiting for food, her hand went to her pocket and then she screamed. And of course, the news spread, and we were all summoned by Dr. Sylvia Kamath, the then head of anatomy, who gave us a big long lecture about dignity of life. One of those regrettable moments, but you remember it all your life. So I can go on and on, but that's the funny one I can relate to you. The faculty was amazing. Because we were just 60 students back then, the faculty, all our professors, assistant professors, they knew each one of us individually. They knew not just our names, but they also knew our personality. They knew us just like a parent, just like a mother knows a child. They could read our mind and knew what pranks we were up to. And so, and even till today, each one of them feels like you remember an uncle or an aunt. So that closeness was there, that intimacy was there because we were a small group. I would go back to Dr. Sylvia Kamath. She was one of those people who was not just a very good teacher, she was a firm disciplinarian, but at the same time, she was amazingly loving. So even when you got scolded, you did not feel like she was against you. You knew she was doing it for your own good. Uh, and and that type of relationship, I think, is probably very rare and hardly happens today in a more mechanized world where we don't interact human to human. We interact through electronic mediums and larger groups. So I would say, yes, even when she scolded, it did not feel like, she was against you. You felt that was deserved, and she was doing it with love. I was the general secretary at the time, and my class, the batch of '84, I understand is still well known, and we were and still remain a very closely knit group. So I was the first class rep in the first year MBBS, and that also was a pure coincidence. I look back and wonder, like, what got me elected. What I was not even thinking. I just happened to be the most diplomatic guy in the class who got along with all the different subgroups, and I didn't belong to one subgroup or the other. I was the quote unquote outsider. So the nuns decided that I probably am the best suited person, and they have their own unique way of lobbying. And before I know, I was elected as a class rep of a very good cohesive group of people. and we had great amount of fun, and we did a lot of things. So by the time it was second year, when the elections were there, it was almost like, okay, you were such a good class rep, you need to be the general secretary. And so Bobby Joseph was the president. I was the general secretary. Sunita Simon was the culture. She was the magazine person. Mario de Cruz was the cultural secretary. So we were this little group of friends who just evolved naturally into that student body. It was also the time where the idea of cultural festival came. I think one of those conversations in the mess or the dorm, someplace somebody mentioned that, why doesn't our college have a cultural festival, just like all the major institutions in the country at the time, like JIPMER and PGI Chandigarh had. And so the few of us, half a dozen of us, we just dreamed of a festival with no organizational skill, no fundraising skill, and no connections. We were not the privileged kids from, connected families and background. We all just came from very modest middle class families and did not know anybody. But there was a dream, and I think that's the beauty of being young. Is you don't analyze it. You have a dream, you have an idea, you pursue it. And in this case, this turned out to be a very good, successful thing. We did not succeed in that first year when I was the general secretary. We got very close to it, but did not have the enough money to go ahead with it. But the groundwork was laid. We discovered the process ourselves. We talked to as many people as we could. We knocked as many doors as we could. And I would take only very small credit for that. The main driver was Mario de Cruz and Bobby Joseph, but they tell me I had good organizational skills. So I would basically keep tabs on what was going on and get everybody in line and make sure that they follow a timeline. That was my role. And our next batch, the next junior batch, Kiran Saldana, who was the next cultural secretary, he and I were very close friends, and they basically took it to that next level where they made it happen. But we helped them, and it was almost a continuation of a process which succeeded in the subsequent student body, and that was Autumn Muse. And the first Autumn Muse, until a few years ago, that script you see, that font you see of Autumn Muse was actually my handwriting. So I'm the one who took a poster paper and some colors and a paintbrush, and that was my handwriting of that flourish on the A, that Autumn Muse, and that persisted for a few years. Now, of course, it's much, much, much bigger than my scribble on a poster paper. Yes, the recreational area was right next to the mess. So in the hostel mess, right next. And at that time, the music was, there was no digital music. There was a record player with few records which were played over and over again. And there was a cassette player, and we popped in whatever cassette was there. It was 1984. So that was also the time where MTV and other things were just coming of age, and we had one TV in the mess, which on Friday night would broadcast half an hour of what was called Western music from MTV and music videos. And that was the only thing you could see. There was no YouTube. There was nothing you could go and so in that recreation room, would be the place where we would have class parties, and we would basically, somebody was in charge of music, somebody was in charge of food. I, as the organizer, I would tap on different people's skills. So I would, get the nuns to do the decoration and get the girls to put up the food and somebody else to do the music. I did very little work, but I made everybody else do the work. So, but it was all it was wonderful. It was just like having a family party. And sometimes it was ruckus. Sometimes people got into trouble. The first class party was notorious. I was 18 from a modest North Indian Hindu family. I had never tasted alcohol in my life. Uh, I had no idea what a class party meant, but I was the class rep. So I was in charge of organizing the class party, which our senior said you should have after the first month of starting MBBS. So I approached my friend Eugene, who was 2, 3 years older than me, who was the smart kid from Bandra, Bombay. And then Eugene was like, I know what to do. I know what a party is. I know everything. So Eugene and I went to Madiwala, to the liquor store, and we bought the cheapest bottles of rum, gin, whiskey, whatever. And then we brought it back to the dorm, to the recreation room, and we got a plastic bucket, cleaned up the plastic bucket, put some rasna powder, and we poured a bottle of each of those liquor, not knowing what it does, how it tastes, garnished it with some fruits, and actually tasted good. It was sweet, it was fruity, but nobody knew how potent it was. And so that night, people who should not sing sang, people who should not dance danced. Some people went outside and threw up. The nuns were dancing, and there was some priest who came and visited as well, and he was dancing as well. And I was smart enough, I felt responsible enough that I should not indulge in that because I'm the person in charge. So I kind of stayed sober and watched the whole thing. And next day, of course, everybody all over the campus said, "What did you put in that punch?" And so till today, whenever a class gets together, whenever a few of us meet, they always we remember that, and everybody looks at me as to your infamous punch, which got the drunks, even the nuns, drunk. I actually stayed in the hostel. I stayed in B block, and so I had no commute. I still have fond memories of my little tiny room with just a wash basin there, and how each one of us decorated it based upon our liking. Uh, and Most of my batchmates were actually in D block at the time. Just a very few of us were in the B block. And I mean, I don't recall anything particular, but it was always good to stay in the hostel as opposed to day scholars who missed out on half the fun. It saved us a lot of time commuting. And anything which happened, if you heard a noise in the rec room, if you heard somebody talking downstairs, you just went down and joined them. So I think it was wonderful to be in the hostel than not be there. So, and many of the day scholars would often crash in our dorm rooms overnight if there was a party or something else. So today it's like a forest. All those trees and dense vegetation wasn't there. There were some trees, but they were not like today. So you could see the buildings. You could see all the 4 blocks plus the mess in the hostel area and in the campus. Now it's beautiful. It's beautifully landscaped. Now, those days, we also had very tall grass all over. So you had to be careful walking because there were snakes. And I remember a big cobra was in the ground floor of the B block one time. And so there were, of course, mosquitoes. There were one of the things is like there were so many mosquitoes and giant mosquitoes. So it was a little wilder than today. but still wonderful nevertheless. Yes, just like today, the community medicine department, had those big vans back then. I don't know if they're still there or not. Those huge vans with a driver and a nurse, where we would go out to the villages. I still remember the driver, Punappa. He was the driver and or come organizer, come village liaison, all in one man. So we would go out and we would hope that villagers would show up. There was a lot of reluctance. People didn't believe in healthcare the way we did, had different ideas. So it always took a little persuasion to reach out and, to convince them that maternal health is important during pregnancy, and iron supplement is important, and things like that. Very primitive, very basic, but I think it was very important. I'm sure it's a lot bigger, better, and more effective today. But that was the original seeds of St. John's reaching out into the wider area around Bangalore. So there was teamwork in almost everything we did, whether it was academics or whether it was cultural festivals or even a social get-together. And the faculty were very open. I remember during the time we were trying to organize the first autumn news, Dr. Tangam Joseph, the head of pharmacology at the time, we would, Bobby Joseph and I would walk into a room, and she was in charge of money, and so she would guide us, and she would give us little tips. It was an open door policy. Her door was always open, and you could knock the door and walk in and interrupt her. So that level of access which we had with the faculty was the winning formula. That's what made everything happen. So after being in medical practice in United States for 27 years, in the last few years, I mean, all along there were patients who would compliment me about, you explain things well, you talk to us, you treat us with respect, and you hear those things. Every doctor hears those things, and you just brush it aside, as you don't pay too much attention to what it means. But over time, it just dawned upon me that what my patients, what the nurses and others I work with on a daily basis, the quality they see in me, which I don't think is anything remarkable, but they recognize it. And that comes from the values and compassion which was taught in St. John's. Everybody can get a medical degree. Anybody can go to any medical college and read the same books and learn the same surgical skills or whatever they're doing. That part, knowledge part, skills part, can be acquired anywhere in any medical college around the world. But part of being a doctor, 50% is knowledge, which is absolutely basic. You have to have it. But the remainder 50% is people skills, caring and compassion. That part of treating human beings with dignity, whether they're older, whether they are poorer, the poor patients in the general wards in St. John's Hospital were treated with dignity. They were not treated like a rich private hospital where they were neglected. And, so growing up in that environment, learning that, it comes as second nature to me as a physician today, just to treat every patient, whether they're poor, rich, older. And also part of it is also the Indian culture of treating elderly with respect, which is innate in us. And so I practice internal medicine, and I'm trained in geriatric medicine. And I treat only older patients. Basically, I have patients who are 100 years old and over, and a lot of them. And I approach them not with any special effort to treat them, to treat older people with dignity, just comes naturally, and that came from St. John's. That compassion, that respect for human being, the dignity in every human being, uh, that came from St. John's. And it's much later, after leaving St. John's, when I saw doctors, people I did internship with, residency with, people who came from other medical colleges in India and the United States and around the world. When I saw them uh, not have those skills or be lacking in some of them, that's when it dawned upon me that I was privileged to have that extra touch, the remainder 50%, which goes to make a better doctor, that 50%, which is the non-academic 50%. In that, St. John's basically excels. And I don't think that too many institutions around the world which have that. So that's the greatness of St. John's, which I'm truly grateful for. Whatever I've achieved, whatever I do, I mean, a big chunk of that success story is because I was privileged to be in St. John's.